like to call the meeting to order of the Participation and Success Committee. I want to welcome all of our audience members here, all of our participants, and in particular the Vice Chair of our board, Lynn Phillips, other board members, Elaine Mendoza, Fred Heldenfels, and Joe Hinton, and that's it. And Bob Wingo, who is a new board member who is on this committee, will not be at this meeting. Also our Commissioner, Raymond Paredes, Deputy Commissioner David Gardner, and Associate Commissioner Glenda Barron. So welcome everyone. And I also want to let you know that one of our other new board members, Brenda Hayovich, is that right? Yay. Will be joining us later. She's a brand new board member on the coordinating board, and she is on this on the afternoon committee, and we'll welcome her when she comes. The actual first order of business is my committee chair's report, and I asked Glenda to give me a full report, and it's about 3 pages long, but I really do want to talk about it quite a bit. And that is the 2007 Governing Board Conference that was held October 29th to 30th, 2007. And also within that was the first annual State of Higher Education Luncheon, which was on October 30th. The attendance at the conference, there were 160 in attendance, including coordinating board members and staff. Institutions represented, there were 34, including, and I think this is really significant, there were 9 school districts that were represented. And when we talk about P16 a lot, and we talk about alignment a lot, I think it was very, very impressive that several superintendents from neighboring school districts were there throughout the conference and also for the luncheon. The coordinating board was pleased to hold the 2007 Governing Board Conference in Houston, and with the assistance of the Association of Governing Boards of Universities and Colleges, and with grant support from Houston Endowment and the Lumina Foundation. In conjunction with the conference, and for the first time, the coordinating board partnered with the Greater Houston Partnership, which I'm very, very pleased about that model that I believe that we have now created that can be replicated across the state. During the luncheon, the 7th annual Star Award finalists were honored and the winners announced. The Star Award ceremony highlights the outstanding efforts of colleges, universities, and others to meet the goals of closing the gaps by 2015, the Texas Higher Education Plan. After the training sessions for new governing board members, which were held the afternoon of October 29th, we began the 2007 Governing Board Conference, Closing the Gaps, Seeding the Future Through College Readiness and Student Success, with a discussion of the importance of having a strong partnership between higher education and the P-12 sector in order to achieve the goals of closing the gaps by 2015. I was there, and Fred Heldenfels and the commissioner was sort of there. He was very ill, but he was such a trooper. And Assistant Commissioner Glenda Barron provided a brief overview of several new promising initiatives intended to enhance students' preparation for and success in college. Next, David Connolly, Director of the Center for Educational Policy, Research and Professor of Education Policy and Leadership at the University of Oregon, shared key findings from his research into college readiness. Dr. Connolly is currently facilitating the development of Texas College Readiness Standards, and his 4-part presentation covered important topics concerning college readiness and what can be done to help more students enter college prepared to succeed. Following Dr. Connolly, Carol Dweck, Lewis and Virginia Eaton, Professor of Psychology at Stanford University, then described her work and research on the importance of mindsets that guide students in their desire for challenge and learning, as well as their confidence and resilience in the face of obstacles. Dr. Dweck is widely regarded as one of the world's leading researchers in the field of student motivation. After her own presentation, Dr. Dweck facilitated a panel discussion on student motivation and achievement. Panelists included representatives from both public and higher education, as well as the student regent. Following the panel discussion, Robert Beichner, alumni distinguished undergraduate professor of physics at North Carolina State University, a lot of North Carolina here, right? Provided an overview of his work on student-centered activities for large enrollment undergraduate program's Scale Up project. The goal of this project is to establish a highly collaborative, hands-on computer-rich interactive learning environment for large enrollment courses to improve students' conceptual understanding and ability to solve problems and decrease students' failure in large enrollment introductory STEM courses. We then moved into our first annual State of Higher Education luncheon and 7th annual Star Awards ceremony. The luncheon began with a special awards presentation honoring the Mayor of Houston, Bill White, and his wife, Andrea, A-Plus Challenge, and the Houston Independent School District for the outstanding program Reach Out to Dropouts. Commissioner Raymond Paredes provided a dynamic update despite the fact that he was very ill that day. And he was not faking, were you? Very ill. On the state of higher education in Texas, specifically the accomplishments that we have made and the challenges we still face in meeting the 4 goals of the Texas Education Plan of closing the gaps by 2015 in research, excellence, participation, and success. Following Dr. Paredes' inspiring message, and it says it here, but it really was an amazing message, very, very well received. Ray Perryman, president of the Perryman Group, provided an overview of the benefits to the Texas economy of achieving the future goals of closing the gaps, injecting his special sense of humor, and then some, into his message. The 2007 Star Awards were presented to 4 finalists: the University of North Texas Student Money Management Center, ACCD San Antonio College, LULAC Parent-Child Scholarship Program, the El Paso Community College Developmental Education Initiative Title V Project, and the University of Texas System UT Telecampus. Following lunch, there were 7 cross-sector discussion groups, 4 formal discussion meetings of regents, trustees, chancellors, and presidents, and 3 informal sessions where interested conference attendees met informally with our morning speakers and had the opportunity to ask questions about their work. We wrapped up the conference with a plenary session of some important takeaways from our conference, luncheon, and Star Awards ceremony. I want to add that the panels were absolutely awesome. We had some very, very rich conversation with the panelists. In particular, I think Welcome Wilson, who is the chair of the Board of Regents at the University of Houston, and there was a student from Texas Southern University who is a student of law in the law school, who was incredible. And we had several dynamic speakers throughout the program. And I want to thank Dr. Mary Smith and all of her staff, and Glenda and everyone that worked on it. And I also want to thank Whit Ryder, who's not here, but our colleague who really carried the ball because our board chair, Bob Shepard, was ill and couldn't attend. And at the last minute, Whit came in and really was a champion for the entire program. So I want to thank everyone that was there, and I particularly want to thank the staff of the coordinating board for such great work. From what I've heard, the rumor is that all over the state of Texas, other cities and communities and chambers of commerce would like to partner with the coordinating board for the next State of Higher Education. So. Item 3 is a presentation by Dr. Nicole Hurd from North Carolina. Dr. Hurd is Executive Director of the National College Access Initiative College Advising Corps. She is founder of the College Guide program and will direct the office. She's here today to share ideas on how Texas may be involved. And if you'd like to come forward. Welcome.
First, let me just thank you all for having us here today. We're very, very excited to be here in Texas. As Ms. Bricker just said, my name is Nicole Hurd, and I'm the Executive Director of the College Advising Corps, which is currently a group of 11 campuses across the nation in 10 states. And the model is really to take recent graduates, so they are here as well, and place them in our low-income, low-college-going high schools across the states to really get college-going rates up, with a particular interest in low-income, underrepresented, and first-generation students. So that's kind of their target area. The program started 3 years ago, well, actually 4 years ago at the University of Virginia, where we had this idea that who best to kind of get young people excited about college than people that just did it themselves. So we took this out throughout Virginia with about 14 students, each serving one high school, and had them do a basic curriculum. So what they do is they work with 9th and 10th graders, getting them to think about the right curriculum, to making the right choices, doing the right extracurricular activities, and really getting them ready for college. In 11th grade, they focus on test preparation, so they get them ready for those ACTs and SATs, and again, start thinking about college. A lot of them take them on field trips at that point, because as you all know, research shows if they get to a college campus, that can make a huge difference in terms of actually applying, because they can see themselves there, they can see people that look like them there, and so field trips are also a big piece of what they do. And then in senior year, it's really where the heavy lifting of the triage happens. So they're working with young people on admissions applications, they're working on financial aid and FAFSA forms, they're working on other scholarships, and then in the late spring they work on retention issues, because this is a program where we're trying to focus not just on access but success. We want them to go to the right school with the right match so that they have a degree 4 years from now. So I'm going to let them talk a little bit, because to be honest with you, they're going to steal my thunder anyway. But these are three amazing advisors. They're all recent graduates. Megan Bridges is a recent graduate from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Nicole Miranda is a recent graduate from the University of Utah. And Ebony Leonard is a recent graduate from UNC as well. So Megan, do you want to talk a little bit about what you do? And we'll start with you.
I'm Megan Bridges. I just graduated this past May, and I work in Chatham County, North Carolina. It's very, very rural, in the middle of North Carolina. And the UNC program, actually, we switch between two high schools. So I work at Jordan Matthews and Chatham Central High Schools. Day-to-day, well, I got into this program, first of all, because I'm from near that area, a small town called Sanford, and I went to a high school with over 2,000 students. I never saw my guidance counselor. I didn't know who she was. We had no idea how I was going to pay for college, and my mom really worked with me one-on-one. If my mom hadn't have been there, I would not have gone to UNC or college at all, because I had no clue. I only took the SATs once because I was unaware that that was a huge necessity. We didn't know anything about fee waivers. We had to work to find that money and put it together. So I knew that if this program had been in my high school, that I would have been in that person's office every single day. So that's what really got me interested in the program, is I know that I would have used this immensely. A friend of mine worked in admissions and told me about it, so that's how I applied for it. So now I work in two high schools, and the job is what I thought it would be and so much more. The students in my area, one of my high schools is a lot of farmer children, and the other one is there's a recent influx of immigrants from Mexico and Guatemala that work in Chatham County in the chicken plants. That's really what sustains the county economically. So there's 40% Latino in one of my high schools, and the rest is just divided between white and black. So there's a lot going on politically within the county. So focusing just in on the high school, there's clearly a lot of issues. A lot of the students just don't know anything. Their parents haven't gone to college, they're first generation. I have students who are in the top 30 rank of their class and didn't even know they had to take the SAT or ACT to go to college. It just never occurred to them. If you ask students, some will say they're going to college, but connecting the A, I'm going to college, to B, how to get there, is the steps that we're really there for. I make a lot of checklists for students, including athletes who don't know they have to register with the clearinghouse in order to even play on the college level. A lot of them don't know they have to have a core GPA. So the main thing that I did, especially the first couple of months, was just answering basic questions and helping students fill out the SAT registration form, just very basic things that when you look at the form, it's about this big. It asks a million questions, some of which I didn't even understand when I first read it, and English is my first language. So I had to go and look up how to answer these questions because I didn't even know. So I work a lot one-on-one with students. I don't usually have them make appointments. There's usually a class most students have where a teacher will let them out, like weightlifting or art. So they just stream into my office with every question you can ever imagine under the sun, including I have a lot of issues of not having internet access at home because it's such a rural area. And if a student rides the bus, that also limits when they can use the internet at school. And if they're on free reduced lunch, that's the only big meal they get a day. So I had a student who came in my office every time I was there for 3 weeks to apply to one school that didn't have a paper application. And he only had about 20 minutes a day because he was on free reduced lunch and had to go and eat that meal first and then run into my office. So I do a lot of working with students to figure out what will work for them. Like some students can get a ride home from the school around 5 o'clock when their parents get off work. So I'll stay after school for them and let them use my computers and work with them one-on-one. I do a lot of one-on-one work and a lot of emailing. My schools don't offer a lot of AP courses on campus, but they can take them online, which means a lot of students do have internet access during the school day. So during their AP psychology class, for example, I get a lot of emails. I don't tell the teacher that they're emailing about college, but if it's the only way they can get the message to me, then I will answer any question emailed. I also held a few events, a college application day, where all the seniors were encouraged to apply to college that day, and that really got them in the right direction. I also had a Latino college night that was directed at parents, because what I found was that a lot of the students did want to go to college, but it's very hard to get that information to their parents if there's not enough documents available in Spanish. And a lot of their parents only speak Spanish. So I had the entire night done in Spanish with 2 speakers coming in. I was actually the only person there who didn't understand Spanish, ironically, and I organized it, but it went really well, and a lot of the parents came and were able to get that information that otherwise isn't given on websites or on paper consistently and all together. So I have had a few events. Mainly, I work a lot. I do any in-class presentation that anyone asks me to do. If the teacher comes up at 4 o'clock and says, tomorrow morning at 8 a.m., I'll give you 20 minutes. I need you to talk about financial aid to sophomores. I will stay up all night finishing that presentation because that's classroom time that a teacher is willing to give me. So I just have teachers coming to me saying, I've had a lot of students say they want to get off of the university track because they can't afford college. So then I go in and talk about Pell Grants and North Carolina's grants and how financial aid works, and really just explain that so that they don't lose motivation early on, because that's really important. So I think I talked a lot.
Nicole, you want to talk a little bit about what you're doing in Salt Lake?
Sure. I work at a high school. It's called East High School, and it's located in actually a very affluent area, but 51% of our student body is minority, and then 40% is Latino, and very, very poor. And I find that a lot of our issues there, I do a lot of what Megan does as well, you know, ACT preparation and in-class presentations and events for, you know, the Polynesian parent night, Latino parent night, this parent night, and whatnot. And so a lot of those events go on, but I find that it's a matter of I get a lot of parents who call in who speak Spanish, and luckily I speak Spanish, and my family were Chilean, so I'm a native speaker, and it helps a lot because every call that comes in that's Spanish speaking is transferred to my office, even if it doesn't relate to what I do, and most of the time it has nothing to do with what I do. You know, it's like, did my kid come to school today? I want to know if he's been there. You know, and other people can't answer those questions, and so to have them know that they have someone that they can talk to at the school who can answer questions about their children, about their students, is really helpful in beginning the process of, you know, letting them know that, oh, you know, that too, and guess what, he's at an age right now where, you know, he needs to start thinking about college, and then we start talking about that, and luckily there's a lot of information from like Sally Mae, where we get these books that are all in Spanish about guides going to college, how to pay for college. And the parents will come into my office and will talk to me a lot, and so I have a lot of parent contact. And then the students there, and so they know that we're all kind of eyes are on you type thing. So it's been kind of a challenge in that way, but also it's been great because I'm used as a resource, and I'm really happy about that. Apart from that, I don't know, I do a lot of what she just said, so.
Evan, you want to talk a little bit about what you're doing in Durham?
Yes, I work in Durham, North Carolina, which is kind of a more urban area as opposed to Megan working in the rural cities. Both of my schools have roughly about 1,300 students, and they have 4 counselors, so 1 for each grade level. So I think definitely a big part of my job is just being there for that senior counselor. For example, my high school, Hillside High School, she has started at like 315, but now it's at like 298 seniors. But she's the only counselor, and right now doing transcripts, recommendations, so many other things. Like, she just doesn't have that time to sit down and do what I do. Like, if my office is open, you can come in. If I'm in there, which I'm there. I too have 2 schools, and I alternate each week. So like this week I'm at Southern, and then next week I'll be at Hillside. And so if I'm in my office, you come and ask me whatever you want to, whatever you need, however long it takes. It doesn't matter because I'm there for them. Like, without the students, I wouldn't have a job. So, you know, I don't have to answer to the county. I don't have to answer to, you know, the State Board of Education. I don't have to answer to any of that. I answer to Nicole Hurd. And so So that's what I'm there for, and so it's definitely such a big help, like for the counselors, because it's not even an amount of fact that she doesn't want to help them or she doesn't want to be there for them. It's just like I have so many students, and then students, sometimes they just have the simplest questions about SAT or just need help. And what seems so simple to us sometimes, just registering for the SAT is like, oh my God, thank you so much, Ms. Leonard, for letting me use your computer to register. And it's like, oh, that's nothing, it's whatever, but it means so much to them. And I think definitely at my school is just changing the culture of college, because for so many of them, they can't really make that connection of having what a 4-year degree is as opposed to a 2-year degree, and how very important it is in terms of jobs, because for the students, they're looking at the right now. And right now, I had a student come to my office, and he was like, oh, I'm going to go to a 2-year school, just to get a degree or something, because I'm working at Walmart and I make he's like maybe an assistant manager or something, because he's working far too much to be in high school in the first place. And he's like, yeah, I make good money right now. And I'm like, but you're living at home, you're not, really paying for anything. When you turn 18, is that really going to be good money when you have to pay for rent and gas and electric and a car and this? And he's like, oh, well, I guess not. And so they really don't make that connection of the real life as opposed to making, this little bit of money now. And it's just really helpful to be there, and especially being young, because not only, especially, we're here for the college advising, but sometimes we're here just to be an advocate for the students, because some of the teachers and the counselors, they are older, some of them, so they don't really know all the issues that they're going with. And I've had students sometimes come to my office and talk to me about nothing that has to do with college, but I let them do it, because I feel like, if I'm not there, they might not talk to anyone, and then, they might go make bad decisions or do something. So, I definitely really appreciate this job and just being there for them.
So, as you can see, the magic of this program is the recent graduates, and the enthusiasm and the energy and the great modeling they do as they've all finished a 4-year institution themselves. The data that we're collecting on this program shows that they're doing their job very well. In Virginia, the first year, they saw over 7,800 students on one-on-one appointments. They saw over 1,200 parents one-on-one, some of the work that Nicole was talking to you about. They've helped fill out over 800 financial aid forms. They took kids on over 134 field trips. And we're, again, replicating this in 10 states throughout the country right now. One of the things that really drives this is our counselor ratios, as you all know, and I know I'm preaching to the choir, but our counselor ratios in this country are about 488 students to every one counselor. So what they really are is a supplement to our guidance staffs. Our guidance staffs are so busy with testing and scheduling and disciplinary issues and all the things that they have to be held accounted for, that the college counseling piece is something they don't get to do a lot of anymore. And so the beauty of this program is that they know, because they've just been there, what college is like. They filled out those forms recently. A lot of them are low-income, first-generation, and underrepresented students themselves, so they can say, hey, I know what it's like to be a low-income student, and I know how scared you are by that sticker price, but let me tell you how you do it. Or, you know what, I was a first-generation student myself, and I know what it's like not to be able to talk to mom and dad about this, but I'm happy to help you any way I can. So they really have a wonderful role of being both role models and advocates. One of the things we do is we have them go visit all the other institutions of higher education beyond the host institution in their state while they're training. So they're not recruiting for one campus, they're recruiting for all forms of higher education, whether that be a vocational school, whether that be a community college, whether that be a 4-year institution, private or public. And one of the great things is as they go meet all the counselors, all the admissions people and financial aid people and all these other institutions, they can become really great advocates. One of the things we're really proud of is that they can pick up a phone and call. For example, here in Texas, if they were an advisor, they could pick up the phone and say, hey, I'm the advisor from X school, but when we were at Texas Tech, I met you, and I've got a kid here who really wants to go to Texas Tech, but we have a question with number 10 on the application. Can you help? And the answer is always yes, and they remember the advisor from the best tour. In Virginia, one of the best stories we had is UVA, when we pulled up for the first time in front of Virginia Tech, there was a lot of, what in the world are you all doing here? But they realized that we're now recruiting for Virginia Tech as well as for all the other schools in Virginia. But we had a young student, first generation, underrepresented, who was about $500 short and really wanted to go to Virginia Tech and been admitted. And our advisor called up and said, hey, this is the advisor. I know I'm based out of UVA. We met on the bus trip. But let me tell you, I've got a kid right here, first generation, underrepresented, really wants to go to Tech. It's his dream, and we're about $500 short. What can you do? And the financial advisor found the $500. Now, most financial aid offices aren't going to publicize the fact that there might be a little wiggle room, but the one thing that these young ladies and their colleagues do very well is, as you can see, is convince people that maybe they want to take another look. We actually had one counselor in Virginia so hound a admissions office about taking another look for a young man who'd had some really tragic things happen that they finally did admit him after another vote, and now he's got a 3.7 at Old Dominion. I got a call from their admissions office saying, thank you, we never would have admitted him otherwise. So they place a really remarkable voice to these students that might not have the voice because of their parents or because they're first generation or they're low income or they feel completely intimidated by this process. We love to be here in Texas for obvious reasons. 78% of your young people are graduating from high school, but only about 25% are finishing with a 4-year degree. So we feel like people like Ebony and Nicole and Megan could really convince those young people to go on to higher education. And so whether that's, there's also so many schools, so many great schools here in Texas that we think there's lots of possibilities of how we could find versions of Nicole and Megan and Ebony here in your institution. So we are here to just kind of present the model, and I think we've got a little time to answer questions. We don't want to take too much of your time up, but we just want to say thank you, and we'd love to be here in Texas.
Thank you very much. Hopefully the three of them only have a one-way ticket. And you too, for that matter. Comments or questions? Elaine?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all for your presentation, and thank you for your passion and what you do. That's incredible. Good stories. It sounds like you guys are doing incredible things. You have a lot to do. Have you ever gone down into the pipeline to elementary or middle schools to get them starting to think about college at all?
Right now, actually, we're talking about, there's a state initiative that Utah is having. It's like the State Scholars Initiative or something like that. And we're thinking about going down to the 8th grade to our feeder schools and possibly going along with some of the board members from the state initiative and going with them and talking to them about it and letting them know that we're there. And, once you come up to, East High, I'll be there for you or something like that.
In your experience, do you think that would help if you had your 9th graders already thinking about it?
I definitely do, because the problem that I found this year coming in with the seniors is that so many of them, Miss Leonard, 9th grade year, I came in, I just kind of, blew it off. I didn't take things seriously. I really didn't know the importance. And, 11th and 12th grade year, I really got serious. And I'm like, yeah, that's really good, but colleges do look at everything. And, it's kind of hard. And it'd be so much better to get in their 9th grade. Look, take it serious now. Take it so serious because, it is important. It's better to do well your 9th and 10th grade year and 11th and, have that choice of where you want to go to school rather than, I pray someone lets me in. So.
Do you think, in your experience, do you think it would help for families to be engaged earlier in the process?
I definitely think that's important. There's just a huge lack of information. So if you're going into the 9th grade and you see the sticker price of $14,000 for a public university and, you're working 2 jobs and your parents, you're living with one parent who also has a minimum wage job, there's no way that you can pay $14,000. And a lot of students just get very disillusioned early on. And, you can't blame them for not trying in their classes when all they ever knew is, I don't have $14,000 to go to college. They don't have the parents. It's not that the parents don't necessarily encourage them, it's just they don't know either. They don't know that there's financial aid available. And it's just such an elusive thing. And, you see the commercials for those for-profit loans and that type of thing, and they don't want to take another loan. They may not even have the credit to get a loan, so that's not even an option. So I think families are very important. That's why, she was talking about the family nights too, is it's not necessarily that they're not there to support. Some of them aren't, but it's also they just don't know how to support.
Well, the other issue we see is that some of these students, a lot of what we work with too are undocumented students. And so it's almost like, what is the point? If I can't go, if I'm not allowed, if I don't have any money to go, if I can't get any money to go to school, and even state money, it's really hard to get for them too, or private scholarships and things like that. It becomes very difficult. And so if they've already had that message sent to them, 1,000 times before they even got to high school, it's really hard to switch that message around.
I think one of the things that we're trying to do is more middle school outreach to get them to go to their feeder schools. I think one of the things that works really well is, to be honest with you, is their age.
Absolutely.
That they're kind of magic in terms of their
Their
ability
age and their
to.
background, the fact that you guys had to scratch and claw your way too. I
Yeah,
mean, that-
yeah. And the parents, too, is funny. There's a fair amount of skepticism, if I can be completely transparent about the process, of whether 22-year-olds could really talk to a parent about college in a powerful way. And I think as a parent myself, the magic is that all parents want what's best for their young person. And so when they see somebody that's done it themselves and has been trained well and has this, the approval of a major university behind them, like they would here in Texas, that very quickly they have very good credibility and actually become a real advocate for the parent as well as the student when they go through the process.
Thank you very much.
Fred?
I've got two questions, which are completely different questions. One is, how are the three of y'all received by the high school guidance counselors when you step foot on their campus? How does that relationship work? And then secondly, I guess, Nicole, for you, as you replicate this program in other states, what is the funding model? What are the formulas? How much funding have you projected what would be needed to duplicate this in Texas?
You want to talk?
I think for all of us, we've had different experiences in our schools. For me, my counselors, especially at Hillside, she has just been like, thank you so much, because there's no way, that's a school that she has about 300 seniors, and she's like, there's no way I will be able to do and offer such good services without you being here, and I really, really appreciate it. And so most of the counseling staff, they're all pretty receptive at Hillside. Some of them, you do run into your people that have been there for 20, 30 years and like, what is this 22-year-old going to tell me about anything? And it's like, I'm here for a good cause. Like, I'm really not trying to take your job or anything like that. I'm trying to help you. And, I think that's the biggest thing we try to stress, that we're here to help you. We're not here to steal anybody's job or take anyone's shine. We're just here to do whatever you want us to do to help or whatnot. So.
At my school, actually, at first it was a little bit rocky, just a little bit. There were a couple counselors who I was a little bit worried about. And then suddenly they kind of started seeing, because it's kind of territorial sometimes in counseling offices, and they started seeing like,
Don't have that in Texas.
that I was a help to them and that I was really just there to support them. And now, I'm invited to the barbecue.
Yeah, to the parties, to the Christmas parties and everything.
Exactly. So, at their houses or whatever. And they've really stepped on board. And actually what's really great about my school is that the administration is so behind me, and they are just so happy with our program and with what I do for them and for the school and for the parents, that they really want me there, and they have tried to keep me on, and they keep trying to tell me, don't go to law school, just stay here. So it's been great.
And I think we all know of advisors who the counseling staff is not on board, and they're very territorial, and because a lot of that is, in a way, although they don't have time for the college aspect, that's what they really get credit for the students for. Because I didn't realize how much guidance counselors do until I started working in a high school. You don't realize that as a student, and so when they don't have time one day to help you with college advice, all you know is, they don't ever help me. But even when the counseling staff is not on board, the students will find you. Once one student finds you, they go and tell three others. Ms. Bridges knows how to get me a fee waiver for the SATs. Apparently, you can also have your application fee waived if you have an SAT fee waiver. And so even if the counseling staff, isn't on board and your office is way away, and the students will find you. I've definitely found that out. The word gets around. I'll have 4 students come, Maria, you helped Maria yesterday, I need the same help. So the cool thing about not being employed by the school system is we're only there for college advising. And that is what the students need. And when they know where your office is and they know what days Ms. Bridges is going to be there, they're in your office. They find a way to get there. Some of them get out of their math classes. I don't know how. But the students find a way. So even if the counseling staff isn't on board, our program. But even if they weren't, I think it would still work. You would still be able to get your message out.
Let me just tell you from the management standpoint how we feel about our relationships with our guidance counselors. To be frank, this program doesn't work unless we have complete buy-in from our K-12 partners. And, a lot of higher education programs, I'm sure none of them in Texas, are known to be a little arrogant, to be honest with you. The higher education comes in and says, we can fix, whatever we want to in K-12. And to be honest with you, I have no interest in being involved in a program like that at all. And so from day one, the philosophy has not been to be anywhere near any of that arrogant higher education interaction that we have with K-12 partners. We've been very, very transparent. We've tried to have our superintendents and our guidance counselors and our principals be part of the hiring process, the selection process of our advisors, so they feel ownership of the program from the beginning. We have them attend some of the training so that they also are involved in educating these advisors so they feel good about the training they have. But to be honest with you, the most important thing we find in an advisor is not their major. As you heard, they all have different majors. It's not their GPA. If I can use these words, the most important thing I'm looking for in an advisor is grace and humility. That they can go into a school and be humble and say, hey, I'm here to help. I don't have all the answers. I know you've been here a lot longer than I am, and I know you'll be here long after I'll be here. But for one moment, I think I can help you inspire your students, so how can I help? That's all I'm asking for advisors to do. So if we can get that grace and humility captured in young people like this, I think we've got a program that counselors really get excited about. We tell our school system partners we don't want to, they can't replace anybody with this. They can't change their lines. They can't say, oh, we've got somebody from the University of North Carolina so we can fire a counselor and hire another STEM teacher. It can't work that way. They are absolutely 100% supplemental. They're there. The only thing we ask from the school system is some space and a phone line. And so this is not a burden on the school at all in terms of financially. And our guidance counselors are really involved, again, in the recruitment of these guides and the training of these guides and the day-to-day support of them. So we've been very sensitive. I'll be honest with you. I'm a huge fan of Teach for America. I've had a lot of students go and Teach for America, but a lot of teachers are very offended by the idea that a 22-year-old can do their job. And I think one of the beauties of this program is that we're not saying a 22-year-old can do their job. They can't do the disciplinary pieces. They can't do the scheduling. They can't do the testing. They can't replace them. What they can do is one little sliver of their job, which is college access. They can help them with financial aid forms. They can help them with admissions forms. And we cap them in a 2-year commitment and tell our guidance counselors, we so value your credentials that if they're really good at this, then they need to go to an education school and get your credentials. So we've actually kind of affirmed their credentials as opposed to saying that a 22-year-old can do their job. And I think our counseling colleagues really appreciate that about the program. In terms of the funding model, it costs about $35,000 to put one of these fabulous young people in a school. And so they're on a AmeriCorps or a Teach for America type gap year service salary, if you will. They get $10,000 for the 10 months in their school as a housing stipend. They get another $10,000 as their service stipend. They get $5,000 for their loan forgiveness or future education. Again, you know, Nicole wants to go to law school. I think Ebony wants to go to law school. Megan's still thinking about her future, but a lot of them are off to medical school or law school or professional school. And the idea really being that they're not education majors. Our education majors are already going to serve our schools well. What I'm trying to find are really bright young people who may get bit by the bug and go into education or may decide to go on into another profession. And wouldn't the world be a better place if every lawyer, doctor, professional spent a couple years in public education? That I'm hoping that, and this is the idealist to me, that someday they'll be sitting in chairs like yours. They'll vote different. They'll write their own philanthropic checks differently. They'll sit on school boards and do all sorts of things differently because they spent a couple years in public education in their 20s. And so the funding model is really about $35,000 to place them in a school. Plus, then the institution of higher education that hosts them has been paying for some kind of staffing support. So somebody at that university will oversee their work.
And this was funded by a lead grant from Jack Kent Cook Foundation at UVA, but
Yes.
Are they funding all the programs in the States?
They funded UVA, and then they funded another 10 through a competitive process last year. So they're actually all, and part of their counselor stories is they're all part of rookie programs this year. So Virginia's now in its third year. And really what my job at the national office is to help support and sustain those programs, but also expand. So in addition to the Jack Kent Cook funding that's been spent for this cycle, we're looking at fundraising from other sources of support, both national foundations, corporations, and others. So if Texas joined part of the National Advising Corps, you would be part of the funding stream that I'm hoping to raise for this program.
Lynn?
I'd like to ask Megan and Nicole and Ebony, you mentioned, each of you, the different factors that cause students to have low expectations about their future and whether they can go to college, and maybe some of their family members. What do you find about the expectations of teachers for the kind of students you're trying to reach?
Teachers. Well, I think that In my schools, I mean, it varies by population. Because during my Latino college night, actually one fact that one of the speakers said that was translated to me really hit me was that the school is 40% Latino and there's only 2 Latinos in the AP classes. So clearly something isn't being right. Like whether it's the track they're being put on right when they come right in, or it's the way teachers are responding, their grades are suffering, and of course a lot of them are learning a second language. But the teachers are pretty on board with the program, but their expectations for students do vary, and that's something where it's not, when it comes to students complaining about a teacher or they're having an issue with a teacher, that's not my job. I'm always there for the student as an advocate for them, but that's another one of those things where the counseling still has what they do, and I am the college, advising piece. Of course, if it's going to affect their GPA because the teacher doesn't like them and is going to give them a D, and that really would cause the school to relook at their transcript, then of course that would be a separate issue. But mostly, like with the teachers, it's good. They want the students to go to college. But a lot of times, I mean, there's so much testing in schools now that they can't really have that piece either. I mean, their classroom time is pretty much spent making sure that their students can pass the end of course exams. In the schools that, aren't yours Leandra schools?
Yeah, mine is Leandra. The 2 schools that I'm in, they were part of the Leandro case in North Carolina. I'm not sure if you all have heard about it, but basically about 17 schools were threatened to be closed if things didn't change in terms of test scores. And actually one of the schools that I attended in high school, James B. Dudley Senior High School in Greensboro, North Carolina, one of our colleagues, she works there. So, and Hillside and Southern are very similar to those schools, but the teacher expectations, for me, it just seems to go along the track that the students are on. If they're on like the college prep, the university prep track, then they're kind of like, oh, they're going to college, we really don't need to do anything with them. But it's like that middle group who may be on the tech prep track, but they can, go to college or go to a 2-year and transfer to a 4-year, but people are just kind of like, oh, whatever. And then it's like the people below that, it's like, I don't know, it's just so sad because like people have no expectation of them to do any more because they've already been put on this track since like middle school or elementary school, and it's kind of sad that they're kind of locked into this. It's really hard to get out of sometimes. But there are teachers that are like, the teachers definitely are really behind this program and, love for you to come in and talk to your students because they know sometimes, they can't, like they were saying, they don't have the time because they're like teaching it for EOC. So most teachers are really behind you. Then you'll find some that still don't know who you are by like the 2nd semester, and they're like, who are you? What are you here for?
For a hall pass.
Yeah, and it's like, where's your hall pass? I'm like, I work here. So it just depends.
I'll appreciate that one day.
Yeah. Like being carded,
At my school, I find that a lot of the teachers really appreciate what I'm doing there. I really think they want their kids to go to college. I don't think none of them don't want them to go. I think they all want them to go. But I find that many teachers, we have over 2,000 students in my school and 420 seniors. So I work a lot with them, and they have so many students in and out, and some of them will transfer, some of them aren't graduating, so they need to go get credits elsewhere, and so they lose a lot of kids, and it's hard for them to keep it together with that. And so many times they're just focusing on helping their kids pass the class. And so what I do is I provide like posters that they can put up in their classrooms, or just give me 5 minutes to just let them know who I am. And they're like, great, just come in, 5 minutes. And they'll put up the ACT dates and the SAT dates and when you have to register by. And I see them in the classrooms and I'm like, yes, it's made it in. So a lot of the teachers really are on board. And some, they're just there.
Can't win them all.
Not win them all, yeah.
Other questions? Commissioner?
My main question was, what sort of training do you all get? Is it uniform, or does it vary from site to site?
The training is fairly uniform. All the schools, we've given them some suggestions, and then we also look at their training before they implement it. So this group, they all spend about 6 weeks in training. And again, the universities have been very kind about giving a lot of in-kind support to that. So the admissions office talks to them about how to write a good admissions essay. They do some case review so these young people actually can see what an admissions case review looks like. The financial offices do all the financial aid work with them, so it's not just the FAFSA training, but it's also packaging loans and packaging aid, so they can actually see how that works. They spend a lot of time talking about diversity outreach. They spend a lot of time SAT and ACT prep, so that, you know, a lot of the populations we're working with are never going to afford a Princeton review or a Kaplan course. So they get a lot of time on test preparation. Again, they spend a lot of time touring other institutions of higher education because their job is really to get kids to all forms of post-secondary education and meet those folks on the ground so they can do that advocacy work. And then they do all come together. This is one of the exciting things. So we're 62 strong this year. We'll be 138 next year. They all come to Chapel Hill for 4 days to train as a national group. So.
How much of an obstacle is FAFSA?
Oh, the FAFSA.
Well, it's very long. I think the biggest issue that I am anticipating is the non-traditional families. You know, I live with my aunt. I haven't seen my dad and my mom in 10 years. My mom's dead. I live with, you know, I've already had students come in and say, how do I fill this out? You know, I live alone, or I, you know, live with a friend. I don't know where my parents are. I don't know if they file taxes. And then, of course, with the undocumented students, I don't have a social security number, and then I'm like, do you have an alien registration number? We're in the process of getting that. I mean, I've had parents come in and bring me all the documentation and stuff that they got from the lawyers 3 years ago, and then I called to see what the status of their immigrant, I called to see the status of an alien registration number. But I mean, I anticipate that being a problem.
From the Virginia program, I can tell you nationally, it's what 1.4 million undergraduates started their FAFSA forms last year and didn't finish them. So obviously, it's an incredibly difficult form. One of the stories I like to tell about that form is we had a underrepresented first-generation low-income student got into William and Mary, which is incredibly phenomenal, competitive school, and he was African-American and lived with his grandparents. And so our advisor actually helped him do his form, and he took it home. He did it by paper. He took it home, and he showed it to his grandparents. And people with really good intent and very well-meaning said, no, we support you. We need to put our information in. So his grandparents, with a good heart, put in their information, overrode what the advisor told the young person. So he sent it in, and he came to the advisor and said, I'm not going. He said, what do you mean you're not going? We got you into William and Mary, you know, this is great. And he said, no, I got my financial aid letter back, and there's no way I can afford it. And he said, we went through this together. There's no way that you have any kind of charge to go there. And so he looked at it, and this is again where their advocacy role is so important. He realized that his grandparents had gone into there, and he said, you know, your mom is incarcerated and your father's deceased, your EFC should be 0. But instead of having to refile the form and do all the process over again, our advisor picked up the phone, called William and Mary, and said, hey, I've got a young person here. He's a Gateway student, which is their version of Carolina Covenant and all the other great kind of low-income scholarships that are out there, and said, you know, he's a Gateway student, and his grandparents put in the wrong information. Within 48 hours, they'd FedExed a letter back to the high school, giving him a full grant for all 4 years. But that's the kind of thing that, you know, with guidance counselor ratios like 1 to 488, they're just not going to catch it. And that young man wouldn't have gone unless there was somebody there that could pick up the phone and call a financial aid office and say, hey, we've got a boo-boo here. Let's not make this young man go through 100 hoops. Let's just get this right. So,
Other questions?
We applaud you for the work that you're doing, the enthusiasm that you have, and this is obviously this is something you're doing temporarily until you go on to your careers, but you're doing wonderful work, and I can tell you we've all been impressed just nudging each other by your enthusiasm and by your thoughtfulness and compassion for these kids. It's really wonderful to see.
Thank you.
I have a couple of questions. Interestingly, North Carolina, in particular, the Charlotte-Mecklenburg School District and school districts within the state of Texas were among the first, actually, to believe in standards-based reform and really look at outcome from testing. And they were pretty much the two states were the basis for No Child Left Behind. And it's interesting that you all coming from North Carolina and the program are looking at really accountability and as far as these students and what their potential is. One of my questions is, what kind of assessment do you do when you go into a school district or into a state in this case to see what programs are already in place? We have some, as I always call them, pockets of excellence throughout the state where we have some pretty phenomenal grants and other things throughout the state where they have college counselors. So obviously you're looking at, one is schools that don't have a program like that, and two would be schools that are, high need, where they're not sending a lot of students to college. How do you determine that?
Well, and I think one of the things that's exciting to think about Texas is if you look at your Closing the Gap metrics, they align beautifully with what they're trying to do here. So when we go into a school system, there's a couple things. First of all, when the universities choose their partners, we're looking for free reduced lunch numbers. We're looking for low college going rates as much as we can glean them. I know that sometimes that data is very hard to figure out. But once they're in a school, we spend a lot of time having them do what we call strategic plans. Where they go in and figure out who else is in the school. Working with principals, what I found out is that sometimes they have TRIO programs. They'll have, a Upward Bound program, or they'll have a Project Discovery, or they'll have, some of them actually have private community nonprofits that are doing access work. So we obviously don't want to replicate services, and we obviously want to leverage. And so what they do is they figure out who else is in the school, what are they doing, is it a cohort program, is there a Gear Up grant or something like that, and make sure that they're, helping those people even enhance their services, and then making sure they get those young people that aren't being touched by those services. So I think some of our biggest allies are actually our TRIO partners, and our partners that are already doing college access, because they see capacity here that they don't have otherwise. I haven't met an access program yet that isn't understaffed and underfunded, even if they've got some nice grant money. And so I think we really had some great synergy, to be honest with you, when there is something there. And if there's nothing there, then this is a chance for them to start building a college-going culture. So I think, some of the training actually has been done by some of the TRIO programs that are in our states. Really trying to identify places where these young people might not be part of a cohort because, in honesty, they didn't know to sign up at 8th or 9th or 10th grade to be part of the cohort. And so we don't want young people to be punished for decisions that were made early on, and so reaching out and finding that strategic plan. The other reason why I love the strategic plan services is it makes them as real professionals. That in our universities and colleges, we don't spend a lot of time teaching these young people the skills of strategic planning and metrics and evaluation. Matter of fact, I will confess my PhD is in religious studies, and I didn't learn this until a little later in life than I probably should have. So the idea that they have a database, that they're actually measuring their outcomes, that they're measuring their services, that they have a plan, that their guidance counselors sign off on it, which again makes the guidance counselors also feel a real part of this program, and this help with buy-in is very important, so that they can see the big picture of the school, they can see who else is in the school, they can get the leadership of the school to sign off on it, and then they can implement it in a way where they can feel some real accountability and measurement in ways that our institutions really don't teach a lot of young people how to do that work.
And as far as accountability, when and how do you do your assessments as to how successful they are in the schools?
Sure. So they all have a database that stores information. What we're working with as our districts is to actually get enough information that 3 times a year the information will go up to the National Clearinghouse, so we'll be able to see college success rates. So we'll know not only how many go to college, but actually how many finish in 2 years, how many finish from 4, 6, and 8. That data is really not available in any state yet in any kind of regular way. And so I think so we're trying to send the information from the high schools we're participating with up to the clearinghouse, so we'll have a good sense of what this intervention is doing. Obviously, they're not the only thing responsible for getting these young people to college, but it'll be a nice way to track in ways that most of us can't track right now. But we're looking at, they're tracking number of students served, they're tracking number of college visits they make, how many college fairs they put together, and they're looking at really who's going to college and if they finish. So again, I think access is a really important word, but I think success is an equally important word, and so they spend a lot of time. Again, one of the things I love about this program is that they're not current undergraduates. They've done it. They've seen the finish line, and so they can actually say to these young people, you don't need to just go, you need to finish. And we're trying to track that data as well.
We see this as a wonderful opportunity, and I know I can speak for myself. I hope we have an opportunity to work with you all in Texas. Speaking of Texas, we have an almost native Texan in our audience. Dr. David Swedlow is here from the National College Access Network. David, will you stand and be recognized? Thank you for being here. David has been responsible for meeting with various communities throughout the state and implementing opportunities for grants. We've gotten a grant in Houston with A+, and in partnership with our P16 Council, of which David is an honorary member. Ruby Rivera is in the audience. She's a member, and Marina Walden is a member of our P16 Council. And David has brought about $3.5 million to Houston in an incredibly well-articulated program that links Achieving the Dream with what he calls Preparing the Dream. It is an amazing program, and we're really, really fortunate to have him. And he's not just a Houstonian, he's a Texan. He's from Ohio, but we adopted him. So he has come in today to be with us, and tomorrow he'll be in Houston with Commissioner Scott when he presents. David has met with Elaine, right? And haven't you met with, y'all have met? And Lynn, have you met him? I can't remember, but he's pretty much been all over the state and is offering NCAN to all of us. So we've been really, it's a grant through Houston Endowment, and it's incredible. So there are all kinds of wonderful partnership opportunities that I think we can really capitalize on, that will, the end result is working for our students to see college as something real. One last question. Have you all seen in your high schools, specifically, not just the district, but in your high schools, do you hear people talk about a college-bound culture? Do you hear the philosophy of your school district into your schools as this is a college-bound culture, this is where you're going? I mean, is that talk, or is it even talk, or is it reality?
It's talk with some. Like in my schools, they're really big on athletics, so it's talk with a lot of the football players and the track stars, because we have a lot of them. So it's talk with them, and it's talk with, we also have the International Baccalaureate program at one of my high schools, so it's talk with them and some of the AP kids, but...
So it's not a culture.
Yeah, it's not a culture at all. One thing I did at my high school, which I got the idea from one of my colleagues, we made little signs for each teacher that said, you know, I'm a graduate of, and I made like the little seal of wherever you went to school, and I made it for each teacher that like sent me the information. And the reason we did this because we kind of noticed students, sometimes they might not know anyone that went to college. No one in their family did, you know, any of that. But they go to class every day to somebody that obviously had to go to college. But students never really think about teachers as even being real people. So, so it's like we put these signs up, and then students, they started to take notice, like, oh, you know, you went to, you know, state, North Carolina State. Oh, I want to go there, and you know, just to start those conversations, because you know they might not know anyone else did this. So that's a way that we're trying to start the culture of, you know, college. That hey, you know, we're not just going to let you settle for just graduating from high schools.
Yeah, I actually have a student who, she's a Latina student, she's a senior this year, and she noticed within the Latino population at school that there's not a college culture. There's no push for it. It's not something that, you know, the students that are in the AP courses, that's just known. You know, there's always a core group of students who every teacher knows is going, and they're the favored ones. And I think she really took a notice of that, and she's actually applying to some really top schools. Her mom didn't finish the first grade, and her dad didn't finish the third. Her dad is disabled and can't work. And neither one, so she has no one, she knows no one in her family that has gone to college, and she just took it upon herself, probably early in middle school, to figure out how to go to college and to just ask everyone that she knew. And she wrote this essay that brought me to tears the first time I read it. She wants to go to Georgetown and study political science because she ultimately wants to work to make the Latino population realize that it should be, college-bound should be for everyone. And in her last paragraph of the essay is about how she's noticed that for every year since she took the EOC, she has to mark on the end of every end-of-course exam that neither one of her parents finished high school, and her goal is that the next generation of Latino students will not all have to mark that. So I think it's a need that even some students themselves are recognizing, and the ones that were able early on to prepare themselves for college are going and are working to try and change that also. So
I really think as college advisors, our goal is to create a culture of access in our schools where every student feels that it's just a natural next step. You know, and maybe for some students it isn't, but hopefully the option is there and it's given to them. I think that's our goal in the end.
Elaine said, amen. Well, thank you very much.
We'll be in touch.
Yeah. It's all downhill from here, I think.
I want to be like them.
I know. The next item is a written report on the uniform grade point average. Glenda Barron and Natalie Coffey can provide an update or answer questions if we have any. And there's no action required.
Yeah, and all I would say to this is we anticipated that we would have rules for you for the January board meeting related to the calculation of the uniform grade point average for high school students for admission into the general academic institutions. However, our last meeting of the advisory committee will be January 11th, so we will move that to the April date. So at your next committee meeting, you will have an update on where we are, and the rules would be to you in April. It was a little more complicated than we anticipated getting the committee to move forward. So we have made good progress at our last meeting, and we anticipate that we will have our recommendations on January 11th. Thank you.
And will that be in enough time for implementation in the
fall of 09?
09?
Yes, so we'll have plenty of time.
Is the state, or is someone providing software so that we will know that everyone is calculating this?
What we anticipate being able to coordinate with is the electronic student record system that is being put in place for, in this year is between the public schools, and next year goes into place between the public schools and higher ed. There's some questions as to how the system that is called TREX, it's the Texas Student Record Exchange, I've lost the words, but there will probably be some additional costs to have it calculate this so that it will be on the transcript when the higher ed institution receives it. It would be the school district GPA and then a higher ed GPA, which is what we're hoping to work with. And we have TEA staff who work with the TREX system as a part of our committee.
Were we allotted any funds to evaluate the first year and see how it went? No. Because, garbage in, garbage out. We've got to find a way to evaluate it.
That's true. Other comments? No? Okay. Item 5 is a report on the Outreach and Success Advisory Committee. Dr. Richard Nicholas, Chairman of the Outreach and Success Advisory Committee and Vice President for Student Life at Texas Women's University, will give us a report to the committee on the final recommendations. Dr. Nicholas, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure to be here and an honor to have served as chair of this committee. The Outreach and Success Advisory Committee was originally formed by then Assistant Commissioner Catherine Dykes. Looking at the size of the task, we immediately divided into 3 subcommittees to work on the 3 groups of charges. Most of the work of the subcommittee was done by conference call, which is an interesting dynamic in itself. We had only one meeting, the meeting where the commissioner actually provided our charge. And I will introduce the chairs of these subcommittees as I go through the recommendations. The work was divided into marketing, P through 16 councils, and Go Centers, which was the largest of the charges. Beginning with marketing, the charge did change somewhat from the original work of the committee. Richard Sapp, who is Director of Pre-College Success with TG, was the chair of this group. At the time the committee began its work, there was no marketing staff person on the coordinating board staff and no marketing plan in place. Since that happened along the way, some changes happened with the committee. But here is a quick summary of recommendations of the subcommittee. First, for a marketing plan that identifies 2 target audiences, beginning with middle school students and their parents. The rationale for this piece is that this is the age when the primary dropout decisions are being formed, where decisions are being made about which high school curriculum to enroll in and whether or not a college culture or even a stay-in-school culture would be appreciated. And secondly, the first target audience, first-generation students and low-income students. Marketing efforts have to be targeted specifically. My marketing people always ask, who is the audience before they do anything? So that was the first question. 2 messages go hand in hand, focusing first on careers and earnings with a link to education. So often the first generation student doesn't understand the purpose behind this effort. And secondly, to focus on affordability or the assistance being available for higher education. And just as an example, in one of our Go Center efforts, we use a small video. So many of the students, especially younger students, are so involved in video games, and they identify careers. Creating video games is one of the careers they identify. We have a short video that actually indicates they need a college education to be a video game designer. The light dawns for some students within those 3 minutes. Media, of course, has to be appropriate to the audience. It has to be mixed media and must be done in both English and Spanish. The committee has asked that the campaign have a call to action. Too much advertising, too much marketing simply leaves the audience guessing about what the purpose of the ad was about. A call to action such as driving them to a specific website or asking them to use Go Centers must be part of the campaign. The College for Texans website should be upgraded, and I understand now that Carlos Ramat is here, that's already underway. Appropriate for the target audiences, improved navigation of the website, and action orientation, again, what is the purpose of being there, and specific links in support of the Go Centers need to be added to the website. As a secondary area, some specific services in direct support of Go Centers and P-16 councils, such as marketing materials for the centers, needs to be reconsidered. Shifting to the P-16 councils, the first task of the subcommittee was review of the P-16 toolkit. The subcommittee did review the toolkit, has made comments to staff, and the changes are already underway. Secondly, in the more professional area, this is almost backing up a little bit, but the committee asked that a central vision statement or mission statement for the regional P-16 councils be developed and circulated, including specifically the relationship to the state P-16 council and its goals. It's our understanding that this recommendation has already been tentatively approved and that Tracy Bars has been charged with the creation of a draft for this mission statement. Secondly, the creation of a standard practice for establishing regional P-16 councils, including what guidance would be available from the coordinating board, information on successful models, and even who should initiate these groups and what the makeup might be and where the successful models are. In some parts of the state, the P-16 councils are present and active and successful. In some areas, none exist whatsoever. In some areas, P-16 councils that pre-existed the movement are already in place with different missions. Finally, the committee recommends the hosting of a 2-day institute to help councils form, sustain, and implement strategic plans and goals, to provide how-to assistance for the development of P-16 councils, for the development of goals and plans, and for assessment as a follow-up to the current startup workshops. Shifting to Go Centers, the chair of this committee is Alma Garcia, Program Director for the Texas High School Project. And Alma, along with Becky Rodriguez, I'd like to introduce the TW staff who staff this committee, are probably the two best-known queens of Texas Go Centers, and we are very fortunate to have them both involved. Beginning with Go Center effectiveness, the committee recommends the development of a statewide database and a tracking system. Beginning with a record of student enrollment activities, applications to post-secondary education, FAFSA applications, scholarship applications, and tracking all the way through higher education enrollment. And to skip ahead just a little bit to the evaluation plan, this is one of the key recommendations that the committee is making. It is easy to evaluate a Go Center on the activities being done, the presence of a Go Center, the number of students being seen. We cannot evaluate effectiveness without closing the loop. If we see 100 students or 500 students in a Go Center, and we know they took the SAT and filled out applications, we never know if they enroll anywhere. If effectiveness is going to be measured, this database must be in place. Secondly, a record of student data itself, grade point average test scores, dual enrollment credits, and the like, as part of the process of helping match students with realistic choices for higher education. We have to keep in mind, thirdly, here that the database and the measurement system must be adaptable to the Go Centers themselves. School districts and the high schools have different technological capabilities, different sizes, and different support levels. So we have to be cautious about using the technology as the sole method of evaluation. Finally, we recommend a formal evaluation plan, that each partnership must have a formal evaluation plan and some sort of assigned advisor, again allowing for adaptation to the differences in the school districts and the partnerships. Here, the new Houston model under the Gates grant should provide a model, because most of these evaluation recommendations that we have in place have already been adopted in the new Houston plan. Pardon me, normally I have a voice that could fill a room without a microphone, but I'm trying hard to lose it today. Regarding the spread of Go Centers, one of the charges for this committee was how widely should the concept of a Go Center be adapted? Should every high school have one, only priority high schools, and so forth? And here are our recommendations. Not every school does need a Go Center. Every school might profit from one, but at least initially we must focus. Communities with low participation rates, in other words, the priority 1 schools, are the priority for Go Centers, in particular House Bill 400 schools. Communities showing large increases in college-age population, and communities supporting efforts at increases in college participation would be next in line. And finally, venues with a demonstrated success or demonstrated commitment on the part of local higher education institutions, local school districts, and the community should be responded to. Speaking for myself, we receive requests to establish Go Centers, and unfortunately most of the requests come from the schools that need them the least, but the commitment is there, and we have responded to some of those commitments. As a next recommendation, we are recommending a reasonably common memorandum of understanding be set up for the transition of the partnership between a higher education institution and a single school or school district for the establishment of Go Centers. A sample has been drafted and we provided to you as supplemental information. The memorandum of understanding would provide a set of minimum standards, the must-haves, in order to provide for a Go Center. It would enable us to move more toward a consistent statewide model. The MOU would set out the common goals and the commitment of the institutions, reference the supportive legislation. Unfortunately, in many of the cases where we go in to establish a Go Center, the ISD or the school is not familiar with much of the legislation laid out in front of them. In some cases, even the existence of the HB1 funding that could help. And would provide, this MOU would provide for a mutual understanding of the roles and responsibilities of each partner. And again, a draft will be available to you shortly, and obviously there would have to be some changes as it moves around, but it would make the Go Center models more common. Another recommendation is for the creation of Go Center advisory councils as a recommended entity for each Go Center, either on the basis of the individual school or the school district. We recommend a makeup of 7 to 9 members representing the higher education institution partner, the ISD, parents, communities, community groups, business leadership, to advise, not a decision-making group, but an advisory group, to provide advice on accountability, the monitoring of progress, meeting the conditions of the Memorandum of Understanding, to provide technical support, specifically the identification of resources and external support, to provide sustainability and advocates for the Go Centers in the community, to assist with personnel coordination, bringing to bear of external resources, defining some needs, and in particular providing continuity or stability during personnel turnover. Turnover in some of these schools among the key staff is quite high. To use one of my own as an example, we have had a Go Center in one of our partner schools for 5 years. We are now on our 3rd principal, our 6th lead counselor, and our 2nd superintendent. We have more stability in the school, in the Go Center, than the school administration does itself in this particular role. And that's a fairly sad comment, I'm afraid to say. It is a House Bill 400 school. And finally, for additional communication, these advisory councils would increase community ownership of the Go Center, and we believe they have a great deal to offer. The committee has made recommendations on some of the basic resources that should be present. Again, another step toward a more consistent model around the state. I'm not going to run through all of these. We'll have them provided to you, but these would be referenced in the Memorandum of Understanding so that both partners understand what resources are going to be needed. To transition the Go Centers and to build sustainability, this was sort of an added charge for our committee. We need notification, we recommend notification to higher education, to the chancellors and to the presidents about this transition to a partnership model for the Go Centers. Without that, we don't believe that every higher education institution would be on board. We believe that that notification should come from the coordinating board and from the highest level. Again, I'm not going to try to read all this to you. We have recommended changes in the Go Center handbook, and those changes are already underway with the staff. We recommend providing data from successful models, and there are several successful models of different types around the state. Providing the data to the partnerships, to other institutions of higher education. Specifically, the TWU model, which already operates as this partnership model, the AmeriCorps Vista model, begun in San Antonio and now moving to Houston, or the UT Pan American model, which relies more heavily on workshops. They've developed a great deal of expertise in the college-going workshops that allow them to reach more schools and more Go Centers. The committee reviewed all of these models, and we think that if that is provided, it would provide a step up for the formation of new Go Centers. Collaboration in the partnership with TEA is one of our most important recommendations. As Go Centers are established, and I've spent some time doing this, you visit with a superintendent or an associate superintendent. Unfortunately, in many cases, they have no idea that Go Centers exist around the state. And the coordinating board obviously is not communicating directly with superintendents or principals as often as TEA is. And we think that that partnership needs to grow. The TEA was represented on our committee, and I think that they agree with us here. Additional collaborative partnerships are needed. For example, Gear Up, Communities and Schools, AmeriCorps Vista, they have a great deal to offer, especially in staffing support. In some cases, we overlap where there's a Go Center, where also Gear Up or Communities and Schools will be present, and we need to resolve some of that overlap. Some schools have turned us down for the establishment of a Go Center because another group is already present and they think they're doing the same things. The committee has also made some recommendations on the clarifying the role of P through 16 field specialists in this transition, including work directly with the higher education partnerships to explain the transition. And the staff has developed a model for those of us who are more visual learners of exactly how these things might work. The school districts and higher education institutions and direct partnerships. The Go Center Advisory Council is the community level group. The regional P through 16 councils, a more umbrella group with a larger bit of geography. And finally, the clarification of legislative support and the other state collaborations at the state level, all necessary for sustainable Go Centers. There's a great deal more information here, and a lot of work has gone behind it in the subcommittees. I appreciate the work the committee did, but I will stop the report there and see if there are questions.
Well, this is most impressive for someone, a group that only met once and then met by conference call. This is a lot of very, very valuable information. Questions? I'll start with one. How do you see the implementation phase from TEA and the coordinating board? How do you see the next steps?
Some of the steps have to be done by staff, handbooks and websites and so forth. I guess I've been an administrator long enough to have a great deal of belief in clout. If we really want this to happen, and the reason we met once was for the commissioner and staff to be present with all the committee. It made the charge more important to do that. And we thank you for your time in doing that. I think if we're going to make the partnership successful, if you want higher level administration in universities and higher level administration in school districts to listen, information has to come from the coordinating board and from TEA. And I think as we make the transition, as one of the recommendations said, that is the next step. A P through 16 field specialist or a Go Center coordinator working in the middle management of a university does not access these offices and say, gee, let me tell you what we can do for you. I think those two things, the marketing campaign, the materials that are being developed, the recommendations that affect the staff are already well underway. For the Go Centers and the transition to a direct partnership, I think some additional information has to come to the highest levels. One school district we worked with, several of us on the committee working with the same large school district, I won't mention which one, it took months to actually get a few moments of time with the superintendent, and it took using the commissioner's name and a conference phone call to open the door.
I find that hard to, no, I'm just kidding.
And someone earlier mentioned territoriality, which that we don't have in Texas, of course.
Right.
Question. Dr. Nicholas, do I understand you to suggest, or your committee to suggest, that you think that it's not just an ideal for a Go Center to have a full-time staff person, that it's a necessity, a minimum standard, or?
It's an ideal. Go Centers are operating, many of them successfully right now, without a full-time staff member in the Go Center. Go Centers right now have a sponsor in the schools, and we say as part of the partnership that that sponsor must be a full-time staff person, usually a counselor, sometimes a teacher. Operating right now, and let me use my own model so I'm on safe footing for what I'm saying, the collegiate G-Force fills the same role you just heard the description from North Carolina. The difference is it's the same training, it's the same idea of a young person doing that work, but they have a full-time person sitting there when we take our collegiate G-Force to the Go Center a few hours a week. It's the same one-on-one work, it's the same key function, and I think if I brought some collegiate G-Force students here from our university or others, you would hear the same kind of stories about what makes it work and how it feels. But even in a good setting, we are there from 4 to 12 hours a week doing that work. Would a full-time person, a recent graduate, for example, in the advisory model we just heard, would they be able to do more? Absolutely. It is the same concept taken one notch further. The Houston model under the Gates grant will provide some full-time staffing, and I think that may offer a model around the state. It is an obvious resource question. We began our collegiate G-Force and our Go Centers, the students were all volunteers, with the university footing the bill for transportation. We expanded that to grants. A very generous grant from the King Foundation gave some small stipends to our G-Force. Now we have the workforce mentoring money. So the resources have been added, the number of, we have 70 now in our G-Force. So the number of students working, the amount of time in the schools, the number of Go Centers we're able to operate has been increasing. A full-time staff person would certainly do more for us.
Fred?
Dr. Nicholas, I'm glad you touched on that subject, because as I was listening to your presentation, I was thinking about what we just heard from the College Advising Corps. I mean, wouldn't it make sense to marry that effort with the Go Centers and use that as a vehicle for achieving the full-time staffing, instead of having two different silo processes? You know, is there not a way that we couldn't bring those two functions, those two entities together to make the Go Centers more effective?
From what I heard, it almost is the same thing. It's a place, it's trained staff who don't work for the school, whose function is helping with the creation of a college-going culture and helping individual students make those decisions. It is essentially the same concept with additional resources and staffing. I would not advocate creating something else. We already run into that problem with multiple programs. I'm involved in Gear Up, and in our next Gear Up grant, we're building the program around Go Centers to try and keep from having those silos created.
That's really a good point, Fred. And in one of the districts in the Greater Houston area, there's a Gear Up grant with a Go Center, but it's not called a Go Center, and they don't want to be called a Go Center. So I guess my question is, how can we embrace all of the various successful programs that maybe aren't Go Centers, but they have the end result in mind?
If I had a really good answer for that, I'd bottle it and sell it. Again, speak for myself here. These kinds of programs brought together very often have the same kind of goals. I've worked in TRIO programs. I've worked with Gear Up. I'm a United Way supporter of communities and schools from another board I work on. They almost have to be brought to the same table, and I think the simplest answer is the state's umbrella of closing the gaps, the state's need that we have, the Steve Murdoch problem that keeps being in front of us, is the answer to that. If we can bring the people on board, for example, at the time you're applying for a Gear Up grant, you can call it a Go Center. And of course there's no territoriality between federal grants and state issues either. But I think if those people were at the table with the same goals, I know where communities and schools is working, that's not a problem. Talent search sometimes is because it has a cohort as opposed to serving the whole population. If I had to answer that for the committee or for myself, I would say we keep the closing the gaps umbrella and try to bring everything under that as possible.
Well, that would make sense. Commissioner, when we visited Lee High School in Houston, they have a college center, but they don't call it a Go Center. And that's my question, is how can we maximize their efforts and support them no matter what they call themselves?
Well, there are a lot of different models, and Richard's saying we need to coordinate among them and not be proprietary about which model is better than another. Obviously, in North Carolina, the North Carolina model is distinct in that it requires that the students be college graduates already, and of course our G-Force members are mostly enrolled college students, and the other, of course, is that we don't have we don't have the provision that every staff person in a Go Center be full-time. We have some, but obviously don't have that requirement. We'll look at that. Is obviously a very good recommendation. We need to take a look at the landscape all over Texas and make sure we're plugged in, that we're adding value, and that we know what other kinds of efforts are going on. We also clearly need to take a look at the way we can do some of this work online. I noticed she didn't speak very much about that, but there's so much counseling software and career preparation software. We need to take a look at that and use that to the extent possible.
There is some reference to that in our supplementary materials as part of the resources of a Go Center. The most effective Go Centers are using software, several different types. CD references to careers, I alluded to one of those small ones, the College for Texans website. What we're finding is the key is that the success rate is almost based on one-on-one contact. That clears the way then. You introduce the student to the software, to the resources. A student who doesn't think they can go to college, they've been told they're not college material, they've been told they can't afford it, they've been thrown out of the house, probably isn't going to sit down and do that on their own. So the human touch can't be eliminated completely. The work of, whether it's a collegiate G-Force college student or a full-time staffer, certainly can be made easier and supplemented that way. I don't
Let's
think...
think about, I agree with that you've got to have that initial personal, probably one-on-one contact, but a lot of follow-up activity can be done with software, with chat rooms, with other forms of online activity.
A great deal of the tracking can be done that way. We've moved as many schools as we can from a paper tracking system to information online, but unfortunately the resources vary tremendously. I think all of our folks here who operate Go Centers would agree with you. Whether it's G-Force or a full-time staff person, you don't want to replicate the overworked high school counselor who also can't see all those students individually. We are supporting them and introducing them to those kinds of resources. And if you visit a busy Go Center, you see students lined up at machines doing those things with a staff person or a G-Force student working over their shoulder. The initial contact is one-on-one.
Fine.
Just a comment regarding the P16s, and one of the things that, as a formation committee, that we envision our P16 council being able to do is take an inventory of all the programs that are going on in order to streamline, align funding and all that, and then prioritize. Fred, like what you're saying is some of our schools may just need a Go Center with partial staffing or part-time staffing, or some, it would be great to have some college advising corps members in there full-time. I think as a council, looking across our region, we'd be able to take that inventory, baseline it, and then prioritize and bring in the necessary resources vis-a-vis that place, whether you call it a Go Center or XYZ Center, whatever, and get the appropriate resources based on the needs of that population. So that's one of the things that we're hoping the P16 Council can do in relation to impacting that.
That's a real good role for them.
Laurie, two follow-ups that on what Elaine's talking about, and also in the spirit of not duplicating things. One is the Go Center Advisory Council seems like a great concept, but is it anticipated that would be linked or actually drawn from the P16 Council instead of setting up yet another entity?
Our recommendation was that they be linked. Again, not every area has a P through 16 council, so we didn't make it a subset, if you want. Where they exist, they certainly should be linked. Our recommendation was that either each school or each independent school district have that, depending on the number of Go Centers they operate. So there's several orders of magnitude, from very small schools where that's the only high school in the district to obviously very large districts with multiple high schools and multiple Go Centers.
Well, I agree you need to be able to fill in the gaps, but I think it would be a mistake not to, where possible, have it be a subset. Otherwise, you're going to end up with yet another piece of turf. The other thing, and I think you identified this by having set up a marketing subcommittee, is that while it may or may not be important what these centers are called, branding is important. And if we don't get the same consistent message across to these kids statewide through whatever the advisor's pathway is called, then our message will be garbled. So, we've got to have a consistent message and consistent branding on this college-going culture. In fact, to that end, this is a clarification, is it collegefortexans.com or collegeforalltexans.com?
collegefortexans.com is the website.
Yeah, that's terrible.
What is the foundation?
College for All Texans.
Boom, right there.
Yeah. Well, Fred, to your point, Gear Up, Upward Bound, all of these things are the same, have the same mixed message. There are just so many pieces of this. And again, one of the things that the regional councils can do is at least define the scope of each so the community knows who does what and how and with what funds. And then maybe we can neatly wrap them in a whole college-going culture wrapping that is one consistent message and breaks out into what program does what. It's really confusing.
It is confusing.
One more item, and then I'll put my soapbox away. And you touched on this, Dr. Nicholas. how important it is what you measure in evaluating these Go Centers. We're too into tracking and measuring activity. Activity doesn't matter, results are what matters. And this is true of most organizations. Waste time measuring activity. Enrollment, if that's the key result, then we've got to figure out a way to measure that. The other measurements don't really matter.
They matter in the sense of knowing if we're doing the things that need to produce the outcomes. But I agree with you. And some of the staff have heard me on this soapbox for some time. I can tell you how many students I saw, what their plans were, what they did, Go Center by Go Center, but I never know where any of them go unless one of them happens to enroll at Texas Women's University. To track them. That is the single most important measure of effectiveness, and that's why our recommendation is there. The activity tracking is keeping track of goals and objectives, and are the partners doing what they're supposed to be doing. It's very preliminary. It's not a measure of effectiveness.
And we all do that. I do that in my business, but as I try to preach to my own staff, activity doesn't mean results. It's results that count.
And universities are famous for it, using input measures instead of outcomes. But I think even universities have learned that at this point.
And to your point, Fred, a couple of years ago when we first started looking at the results of the field specialists, and they would say that we went to X number of Go Centers, and it's like, you went to them, and then
What happened?
Yeah, and so, you're absolutely right. I mean, you can't measure just, how many site visits. I mean, that is pretty meaningless. I have one other question. In bringing it to scale, obviously the ideal situation would be one-on-one with every single high school student, for that matter, middle school, elementary, and all their parents. But realistically, one of the models that Texas Scholars started was they thought, okay, every single high school student is taking an English class. So they went to every single English class and said, here we are, this is who we are. And that way, at least the initial hit was to every single student in the entire, whether it was 9th grade or whatever. Did you find that in looking at the Go Centers that there's some sort of a maximum ability to reach all of the students in one school at one time?
The first answer to that is that the demand is so different. Again, using my own as an example, in terms of the socioeconomic status, for example, or the percent of first-generation students, or even the current college-going rate, we have one school that is 84.8% financially disadvantaged, and we have one that is 4.8% financially disadvantaged. The number of students who need the service of the center varies tremendously. The second answer is we are there in a school as a partnership, but we have to follow their rules. Some schools will allow you to pull from English classes, for example, or to give you time in those classes, and some will not. Some you can only see a student during lunchtime or during an activity period or after school. And that may be a question to ask Alma Garcia or Becky Rodriguez here about some specifics of it. At TWU, in our model, we have used different models according to the school's demand in answer to your question. Very few actually need 100% participation, but for some it would be every bit as overwhelming as the counselor trying to see every student in the school. But we do not have a single model because our audience is so different.
Any other comments,
I
Lynn?
just have a comment. I'm concerned about focusing too much attention on software and computers because I'm afraid that our priority audience doesn't have as much familiarity or access to those things. Even if we have those in the Go Centers, say a student athlete has no time to come to the Go Center and do any of that stuff. And if he or she doesn't have a computer at home, then, we've got to think about the population that most needs us first, I think. This is an ongoing argument between the commissioner and me, but he thinks the brave new world is just around the corner, and I think it's a decade or so when everybody has access and all. So that's just a comment. I think that is certainly an important thing to be developing, but first things first.
I can't help but comment on the contrast with the College Advising Corps. The young ladies, they found a way to make that contact. They weren't limited by what we assume we're limited to with these Go Centers and the bureaucracy and administration. Megan's texting them during class, or they're skipping weightlifting or art. They just find a way to make it effective, and there's a big difference in the culture of that approach with what we're trying to deal with.
One of the biggest differences is it's their responsibility, one person.
And the high school has let them come in and welcomed them. How many high schools would not do that, or did not think they need it, or think they already have a program?
I would agree. We are rejected by entire districts or by schools to create a Go Center. We, absent a mandate, we are their guest. And where the model you heard, there's an employee that they don't have to pay. They're every day.
Commissioner?
And that gets back to a point that we're working on several fronts. One of our biggest challenges in making sure that Go Centers get the level of support they need in order to be successful is we have to work with the TEA and with the superintendents to place more focus on college going as a high school priority. We just go to high school after high school where the emphasis is on alleviating dropout rates, on achieving basic proficiency scores on the TAKS, and they're exhausted by that mission, and they don't have time to do anything else. And we need to make sure that sending kids to college is a priority for every high school in the state. One of the ways that we're going to address that, we talked about this at the first meeting of the Council on High School Success last Friday that Commissioner Robert Scott chairs, is to have more accountability measures in the K-12 system that do ensure that school districts will focus on college completion. Excuse me, on going to college and completion.
I knew she couldn't resist.
Thank you so much. Just wanted to have an opportunity. In regards to technology, I guess the balance there that I wanted you to know is that students nowadays are very technology-wise. They will find a way to do that electronic connect and that networking. An example I can give you, we're talking about measuring activities. Well, 3 o'clock every Sunday, the telephone in my house rings, and it's a message from the principal telling me, as a parent, that SATs preps are coming up and the calendar for the days for the SAT taking calendar. Can you imagine the impact of that one little technology, which is a telephone? But guess what? My son also got the message on his cell phone. So when we start talking about technology, it's a different way of communication. What we call email blasts, a distribution. Can you tell me what student does not have an email, Yahoo, Gmail, Hotmail account, where actually the students that we're talking about that are offered, the G-Force members, actually do email blasts telling you, just wanted to remind you that this is a schedule that's coming up. So technology does have some factor in there.
Of course, but there's just, people we want to reach who do not have access to it.
That's correct.
And so I think we need to, it's so tempting to think technology can take the place of a full-time staff person.
So thus the balance. The second part is that we do have an IHE, Institution of Higher Ed, and we have the independent school districts that come together. And if you look at one common thing that both of them have is the strategic work plan, a plan that's not only for today but for the next 5 years. If you start looking at the tab, when you start putting that individual district plan, there is a college access, the college readiness component of it. And in there is where it says that Go Centers can be part of that initiative, closing the gaps. One thing that we realize is that the miscommunication is that the unknown. Counselors do not know how a Go Center can help enhance and support what the standards are already saying, and the work is being defined of what they need to do. That's one. The IHE, the institutions of higher ed, say, I know there's a Go thing, but we don't know what the Go thing is. I have visited throughout as part of our research that Dr. Nicholas asked us to do. Is the research is when we go into individual institutions of higher ed, we walk into Go Centers on a college campus. And guess what's in the Student Support Services area? On the monitors is the Go symbol. And kids are asking, what's a Go? Why is Go there? What an opportunity for that one-to-one person that really identifies what the Go campaign is all about. But guess who else is in the service center? Parents, other adults, students that are there, the workers. So they actually have a opportunity to start looking into what the Go campaign is all about. So branding is very important. Who says we can't have a Gear Up Go Center? Who says we can't have a Trio Go Center? Who says we can't have a Communities and Schools Go Center? A higher institution of ed Go Center? The branding is that the Go is the message. If you were to close your eyes right now and I say, click it or ticket, you already know what that is. Hey, I better put on my seatbelt. If not, there's a consequence. If I say, don't mess with Texas, I better have a trash bag in my car. If not, there's a consequence. When I say go, what do you think? Go what? Go where? Go what? But if we get to the level of saying that Go is a campaign about preparing our students for college, to be college ready, to be career ready, and definitely the outcome that we're talking about to be life ready. So that's the emphasis of the Go Center, that we have to be more very intentional, focused, and definitely have the human aspect along with the newness of technology coming together.
I told you she was passionate about it.
And he said queen of Go Centers, definitely Becky and I'm the queen, she's a princess.
Well, we want to thank you all for your passion and for your commitment, and I'm very hopeful of this next step, which would be the implementation, because it certainly can make a major impact.
We thank you for the opportunity. I want to thank the three co-chairs, Richard Sapp, Paul Reese, and Alma, who did quite a bit of work on this. I know some of the committee members would continue to operate if their opinions were something that would be of value to you. And we thank you for the chance to speak.
Thanks very much. Before we go any further, I want to introduce our newest colleague, whom I haven't even met in person, but I've talked to her on the phone, Brenda Payovich from the Dallas area. We're so happy to have you on board, and welcome to our meeting. And she's actually on the committee for this afternoon, but we're really glad that you're here for participation and success. Would you like to say a few words?
I'm glad to be here. I look forward to serving the state in this important position. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. She was appointed, last month by Governor Perry to serve on the coordinating board. Congratulations. Moving to items 6A, B, and C, updates on outreach and success initiatives. Glenda will introduce each item.
These items are all written reports. First is an update related to P16 field specialists. The second is the African American Males Project, and the last is the Closing the Gaps for Latino Student Task Force. If you have questions about those reports, we have staff who are ready and willing to respond to those or provide additional information. We don't have formal presentations.
Okay. Any questions or comments?
If Fred isn't going to say it, my comment is we need to have, measurable outcomes in these reports. We need to have plans. We need to, for the African American Male Success Project, we need to have a goal for year 1, year 2. X percentage of African American males which will pass Algebra 1. I mean, we need real stuff. Right.
Good point. In addition, if we could maybe see who are the people that they're talking to throughout the state, I know that Ron and I talked about the African American Males Project, because there's some incredible prototypes that I've been introduced to over the last several years of single-sex school districts, single-sex schools within school districts, and charter schools. So I would like to see who they're talking to and maybe get some feedback as well.
Okay. And we will provide that to you.
Thank you. Any other comments? If not, agenda item 7A is consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee relating to amendments to Section 1.18E2 and Section 1.18E3 of Board Rules concerning operation of education research centers. And Susan Brown is available for questions or comments. 7A.
Anybody have questions on the proposed rule change? Susan, do you have any comments you'd like to add? Okay.
If not,
Move to approve.
move to approve by Elaine. Is there a second? Second by Lynn. Any comments or questions?
This is for all three?
This is for 7B, just for 7B. If no comments or questions, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Agenda item 7C is consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendations to the committee relating to rule review of Chapter 12, Career Schools and Colleges, and Glenda will explain this item.
Well, first of all, we have Chapter 7.
Did I skip something?
7A.
Oh, I did skip. Oh, I'm sorry.
And we are asking our general counsel to come and help me with this agenda item because it's a little bit confusing.
How did I skip that? I'm sorry. Consideration of adopting the, Commissioner's recommendation to the committee relating to rule review of Chapter 7, private and out-of-state public post-secondary educational institutions operating in Texas. That's really easy to say.
It is probably
Bill Francis is going to explain the entire thing to us.
it is probably as complex a chapter of our rules as there is, and what we've got here is our quadrennial rule review is all that is set forth in your materials, and there's a reason for that. Until yesterday, that was all that existed pertaining to Chapter 7. Yesterday, we filed with the Secretary of State for publication in the Texas Register a number of additions and proposed amendments to Chapter 7. These additions and amendments were spearheaded by Governor's Office staff in conjunction with the Commissioner, David Gardner, Glenda, Joe Stafford, and myself, working with the Governor's Office staff as well as with representatives of various accrediting agencies, primarily national accrediting agencies, in an effort to at least allow for an expansion of our base of accreditors who we recognize, or will recognize in the future. In that regard, we also had input from the Texas Public Policy Foundation, significant input, and we also received input from other interested parties. These proposed changes, and I'm not suggesting that we deviate from what you're proposing to do on 7 right now, but what you will see at the January meeting, I anticipate, subject to getting comments based on our publication of these proposed changes, is an adoption of Chapter 7 as it exists, and then a significant modifications to 7. Let me quickly describe, because we'll go into much more detail down the road, but what we're proposing is we're adding some definitions for accrediting agencies, for other items such as an accelerated route to certification, which we're calling alternative certification. That was a proposal by the Texas Public Policy Foundation. We are adding a complete new sections and renumbering the existing sections. This new section would be 7.4, and it will detail recognition of accrediting agencies. And what it proposes is that so long as an accrediting agency is recognized and authorized to act as such by the United States Department of Education and meets certain other standards, in addition to that, that we would then be, as an agency, in a position to likewise recognize that accrediting agency, and then the schools that that accrediting agency accredits would in turn be exempt from the strictures of Chapter 7. The other proposed significant change, there's a number of proposed changes, none of which are in front of you because they're not on this agenda. There simply wasn't time to get them there. Given, frankly, we were working late into the night and rather feverishly to get all of this done, to get them posted yesterday so that they could come before you in January, because yesterday was the last day to go to the Secretary of State and have rules posted that will allow them to be out 30 days for comment. But the other significant change is we're proposing alternative routes to certification in an effort to remove potential barriers to entities either operating in Texas already or entities that wish to come to Texas and establish an educational institution. But at the same time, doing our utmost to preserve educational quality standards. That's what these proposed changes that you will see, as I said, down the road a piece, will do. And so I don't, and Glenda didn't want you to think, and that's the reason she asked me to come and speak to you, didn't want you to think that, okay, we're just going to readopt Chapter 7 as is. Yeah, there will be a motion to do that, but a follow-on motion will revise Chapter 7, or propose to revise Chapter 7 significantly. Finally, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that even presuming these proposed revisions to Chapter 7 are adopted at the January board meeting, staff's work and the board's work is not at an end. We want to, because of the complexities of this chapter and because of the formatting of the chapter, what Glenda and David and Joe Stafford and I are planning on doing is meeting and trying to simplify yet again Chapter 7 so that any entity wishing to operate in Texas can pick it up, read it, and really have a better understanding of what their rights and responsibilities would be. So I would anticipate further revisions at the April board meeting as well.
Okay, so based on your comments, do you feel comfortable with our moving ahead in our vote to move it to the next step?
I do.
Since there's still things...
I do. You could vote to do that, or you could vote to defer action awaiting these revisions, if you will. Either one will work, because what we will probably propose to you in January is Chapter 7 as revised for your up or down vote at that time.
Comments?
I think it'd be prudent for us to delay the vote until we have it all put
This is
together.
just a functional reapproval of what already exists, and not the changes that we're really anticipating. Then what's the point?
Right.
I would be in favor of deferring.
Other comments?
Me too.
Brenda?
No, that's
Commissioner?
I just wanted to say that, and this aligns very nicely with what you said earlier, Fred. This, what we're trying to do with these rules is move to focus on outputs rather than inputs, and focus on what institutions accomplish rather than setting up rules that might be regarded as inhibiting their ability to function successfully. So.
The rule will remain in effect whether or not we...
Oh, yes. Yes, ma'am.
I move we defer vote.
Okay. Motion by Lynn, second by Elaine. Comments, questions?
Does this pertain to 7A, B, and C?
No, this is just 7B, right?
Just Chapter
Chapter
7.
7.
Just Chapter 7, which is
You've already approved the changes in Chapter 1.
Chapter 1.
And then we'll go to Chapter 11 next, but right now we're only on B, which is Chapter 7.
Agenda item
Okay,
7B,
but
which is Chapter 7.
Didn't we vote on B, so now we're undoing the vote on?
No, we have not voted on that.
Okay.
Other comments? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay.
Okay, now we are actually to item C.
Oh, I thought we voted on 7A.
We voted on 7A.
Which is the Chapter 1 changes to the Education Research Center.
Yeah. Okay. All right, agenda item 7C is consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendations to the committee relating to rule review of Chapter 12, Career Schools and Colleges. Glenda will explain this item.
And this is the simple adoption of what is currently in effect.
And we have to adopt it?
Yes.
Okay.
This is proposing no changes to this document at all for January, just reaffirming the existing Chapter 12.
Okay. All right, are there any questions or comments?
Did we have any comments?
We have not received comments at this point. It has been posted.
None of the recommendations from the Texas Public Policy Foundation pertain to Chapter 12?
In April, we expect to bring changes to Chapter 12, but Chapter 12 focused specifically on the two-year career, what we had formerly called proprietary schools. And we do expect changes to come forward as a result of the proposed changes that may happen to Chapter 7, recognizing the accreditors, but that would come forward in April. It would not come forward in January.
Crystal clear.
So is there a time period for reviewing these?
Every 4 years.
I know every 4 years, but it seems crazy to, adopt it and then in April act like we didn't know what we were doing. So I'm asking if the 4-year timeline could stretch till April.
And I'm sorry, I'm unable to respond to that. Bill, can you help me out just a minute? Dr. Phillips has a question I can't answer.
Sorry.
Is there do you know the dates of the review timeline so that we don't have to approve something that we're going to change in April? Or do we have to approve this Chapter 12?
This is for Chapter 12.
We should go ahead and readopt Chapter 12 at this point, because the changes we intend to bring to you on Chapter 12 would be forthcoming in April. Would it have been more efficient if we could have had somehow Chapter 12 being reviewed in April and be able to do with it what we're trying to do with 7? The answer is yes, but...
Well, I'm not worried about efficiency. I just sort of hate to adopt something and then in April we adopt something else. It just seems kind of flaky,
Well, I wouldn't argue. But we're mandated by statute to have this review every 4 years.
And so
The timing is just...
we have to do it in 2007, is it? Or
Well, early 2008, right.
So you're saying it's statutory flakiness, not recommended?
That's correct.
It just
Or
coincides with...
it's a calendaring item.
Madam Chair, I move to approve.
Thank you, Elaine. Motion by Elaine, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Fred. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Goodness gracious.
Part of what's going on here, aside from that flakiness, is the staff, there's tentacles reach from one chapter to another here, and the staff wants to be sure that they're not creating things that conflict with each other in the final analysis, but we're going to have a very different set of rules in place in terms of how we address the institutions, and they will also reflect changes in the way higher education is delivered, which hasn't been the case previously. So these are important changes. We need to do them well.
So it's no reflection on us, right?
Oh, well.
You just
It's always some
You
reflection
don't have to
on
answer
us.
that, David.
Just make it a permanent item on the agenda. We can change it every day.
That's right. Okay, the next item is Agenda Item A, Review of Participation in Success Committee Agenda Items for the January 2008 Coordinating Board Meeting, and Glenda will give us a brief overview.
Today, you will see everything but the proposed Agenda Item B that will be on the agenda in January, and that's a presentation by the STAR Award winners. We did this last year where you had reports from the actual winners on what their programs did in some detail. and that will take place with the 4 winners that Ms. Bricker referred to earlier today. And I think all the other items we have talked about in some form today already.
Any comments?
The uniform recruitment strategy?
That's one of your written reports.
Okay, where was that under?
Believe.
I didn't see that.
Oh, okay, that's probably my error. If you will remember, you adopted the uniform recruitment and retention strategy revisions in April. We discussed it in January, April, and again in July. The reports to us were due to the coordinating board for this current year, December 1, and in October, we got from the institutions the proposals of what they were going to do for this academic year. And Dr. Mark Lopez on our staff, the Director of Recruitment Retention, will be reporting to you on where we are with the uniform recruitment and retention strategy in terms of institutional response and matching that up to the targets and closing the gaps. And I apologize, I thought we had a little section in the document today to tell you that.
Could we see a draft of that, or what it's going to look like?
Certainly. Certainly.
Other comments? When we have the presentation by the Star Award winners, is there a way that their presentation could be, I don't know, maybe sent to all the other institutions? Or one of the things that I think we've talked about before over and over is how we can make a bigger impact on the other institutions of what they're doing. Not just the winners, but all the finalists as well. And that's the best way that I think we know we can replicate these programs. So if there, I don't know what the answer is, but if there's a way that you all can somehow get more information, descriptions of their programs to other institutions.
Put it on a disc and send the disc out.
Oh, that'd be great.
certainly can do
Yeah,
that.
that's a great idea.
The other, while you're on the topic, Laura, the other thing that has occurred to me is that next year or whenever we can find a mechanism to do it, I'd like to tie a cash prize to the winners of the Star Awards.
That would be terrific.
$5,000 or whatever might make sense. It may not be institution-changing prize, but it would be a tangible means of recognizing.
Oh, absolutely. That's great. It's a great idea.
Make part of our Star Award application, the provision of a link where the program could be described, so that when they win, we can just put the link on our website.
Okay. We have a link on the website currently to the PowerPoint presentation that they provided to us for the Star Awards ceremony. It, of course, does not have the detail that will be in the presentations they give you, so we will do that as well.
And where are we hiding that on the website?
Georgia, will you get the address and show it to us before the end of the meeting today?
Let me make one note, an advertisement for Lizette. She got a group of staff together yesterday to go over the idea of making the website much more friendly, and so work has begun on that. Lizette's made another mark.
Friendly period.
Okay, well, you get the point.
We get it.
We get it too.
I can't find things either, so.
Okay, any other comments? Agenda item 9 is a report on the financial aid telethon, and Carlos Simet is available to respond to questions. Any questions?
Our plan is to have the telethons once again in February, which is Financial Aid Awareness Month. And we have provided for you an outline. Our partner is TG, Texas Guaranteed Student Loan Corporation, and we will be going forward trying to reach these communities to provide useful information to them related to how to pay for college.
It's so exciting. I think it's a great program. And talk about the need for an email blast. Is there any way we can get this out to all the principals,
Absolutely.
superintendents, everybody?
Absolutely. We're fully staffed now. We have a new communications director who is present here today, who now we have a full team to be able to promote all the projects that we have in-house.
What's your
I'll leave
identifier,
it to,
DJs?
please, I'll leave it to you to introduce her, if you would,
Please.
Commissioner.
Come on up.
Please come up and
She wasn't expecting that.
Come on up and communicate.
We'll be kind, maybe.
Please come and join me.
Yeah, really.
It'll be okay.
Afternoon.
This is DJ Lozada, who is our new Director of Communication, and her first week here, and this is her first committee meeting, so please
Well,
welcome.
welcome. We're glad to have you.
Thank you. It's really a privilege to be here.
So we have a full plan of promoting this, and we have a really good partner for doing this, and we're recruiting an outside vendor, in this particular case, who's going to be doing the producing and broadcasting the telethon and gathering the stations that are going to be broadcasting in English and in Spanish. And we're going to be helping train the people who are going to be answering the phones. We're upgrading the website. We'll put a banner on the website that will promote this. We will do whatever we can through our networks to let people know that it's going to be there. We want large numbers of people viewing and listening and calling in. And we are trying to direct them, rather than having to send them lots of materials as we have in the past, to direct them to the new revised website and get all the information that they have there. So many of the people who will be calling, rather than us having to produce materials or ship them materials, the material will be available online.
That's great. Somebody said earlier about the being able to access all of the students with iPods or emails and all kinds of things. There is a lot of the school districts now have a emergency notification, and they're using it. I think I saw it on the Dallas ISD website, and they don't just use it for emergencies, but they use it for any kind of information that they want to get to all of the parents, all the students, and that might be a way to get to a lot of the schools. Many of the school districts have that now. In addition, if you will get whatever information to our P16 councils, we will be glad to, throughout the state, get the information through them. One of the members of the Greater Houston P16 Council is with the Harris County Department of Ed, and a lot of times we'll send an email, and she'll send it to every principal in every school in Harris County, and I'm sure all the others have the same access.
We're connected to so many great networks, so we want to use them all.
Great. Well, this is very, very exciting. Other comments?
What were the results of last year's telethon?
We did not have a telethon last year. We had telethons 2 years previously, so we've had them twice. We have, 1 year we had 36,000 calls in during the 5 nights of the telethon, and the other year we had 54,000. And what Carlos is talking about by having the materials on the website is a change in what we have done in the past. We had collected the people who called in. If they wanted information beyond what we could answer on the telephone, we actually prepared packets and mailed them out. And there was sometimes a 10-day delay in getting, as you can imagine, with that volume of calls. We had a delay in getting materials out, so we're trying to be smarter about it this time. For those people who have access to the web, we'll ask them to download the materials so that we can get the packets out to the people who need those in print. And we send it in both English and Spanish. They indicate to us what they would prefer.
So the purpose of the telephone is to basically disseminate information to
about financial
about financial aid
specifically, but we also include information about how to apply to college if they need that information. And what we could tell when we looked at the Department of Education numbers for completing the free financial aid form, there were spikes in both February and March in terms of the number of forms from Texas that were completed and submitted. So while we couldn't claim that it was a result only of the telethon, we know that there was a bubble in the number of those forms that were processed immediately following the telethons. Chris has been here for both of those telethons. Have I missed something in our evaluation?
No, that's about right, Glenda. Also, this year we're actually really touting the College Goal Sunday event that is put on statewide. Sites across the state that students and families are given hands-on assistance with filling out the FAFSA. So those numbers and that data is tracked. We're also promoting TG's financial aid video teleconference, that they do the same thing. They sit down and do either a direct service or a train-the-trainer type of approach, where they do broadcast the FAFSA training and go step by step in filling out the FAFSA line by line. So those two services are activities that we're really touting in the telethon, and we're going to be tracking those numbers as well.
And we might even mention the license plate.
Well, I was going to ask it, when you think of telethons, you think of people wanting to give money. In the previous 2 years, do we have people calling saying, how do I give to college aid?
Unfortunately, no. Most of them were asking about we kept touting $4 billion available in financial aid, and majority of the calls were requesting how do they get a piece of the pie.
Well, yeah, certainly that's what you would expect, but I was just curious whether there was any response, or whether if we created a mechanism for giving to the College for All Texans Foundation, or at least signing up for a license plate.
That was one of the pieces we talked about, was promoting the license plate as a way to kind of get some money back into the coffers.
You can be first in line, Fred.
Thought we weren't leaving the board meeting without. Madam Chair?
Yes.
Just a real quick
Sorry,
question.
Elaine.
Regarding to what we heard earlier about, the one-on-one to fill out the forms, et cetera, will we be able to, at the telethon, will that person be able to direct them to perhaps a Go Center, their nearest Go Center, to go and get the help before the Sunday, before the other events that are happening?
Yes, typically in the past, that's what we've tried to do. We've given either the P16 field specialist contact information, or if we knew somebody specifically in, for instance, San Antonio, because of the VISTA project, Jennifer has a list of all her VISTAs in the different schools, and then in Houston we'll have our VISTA members there, and all of HISD, plus we have the HISD counseling.
So they'll be able to direct the caller to a person.
Wait, specific point of contact.
Good.
If we have somebody that we know of in that area.
Absolutely.
And one of the things we really try to do is you see the target cities. So the night that we're doing the telethon with the Houston station during their news broadcast, we have already alerted the higher ed institutions in that city that they can expect to have referrals from calls from the telethon. So we build a network of people that you may expect to get calls that we refer to you from people who have called in. So the people in the cities that we are going to be doing the telethons to the stations in those cities are fully aware of it. And many of them send volunteers to actually be with us to help answer the questions on those nights.
UT system, they have a staff person in place, Ruby, you mentioned Ruby DeVetta from the Houston area, and she, part of her assignment is to develop a volunteer network across the state, and right now she has about 200 volunteers, she just told me prior to the meeting, available. So as of this time, 200 extra volunteers beyond the financial aid officers and the college admissions officers and those types of folks.
That's great. Any other questions? Lynn?
I was just wondering, since many people would characterize our situation with education, not just in Texas but everywhere else, as an emergency, I wonder if there's any way we might be able to use the Amber Alert technology. We hit a few too many people, but it's so, amazing. I think that the 911 Commission uses it for storms and things too.
When we get closer to 2015, we may have to.
Yeah, really.
That's why we have to do it now, so we won't do it in college.
I used to be on the 911 Commission, so if you want to go see him, call me, we'll go see him.
Well, technology isn't used most of the time, right?
No, hardly ever. But it's incredible.
I've only seen this one down here one time.
Wow.
I like that.
That's interesting.
Go. Go Alert.
Any other comments, questions? Well, best of luck. This is great. Thank you, guys.
It's really exciting.
Last item is item 10, an update on college readiness and success initiatives and the Texas College Readiness Mandates, Responsibilities and Deadlines document. And my script says the updated legal document. It's a legal size document.
Sorry about that.
I'm sure it's legal too. It better be.
I left off a word.
As opposed to illegal document.
And we have staff here who will be pleased to answer any questions you may have from any of these documents. You did not get an updated calendar. The one that you received in October is still accurate, and the one that's on your website.
Comments or questions? I have a couple of questions. On page 4 of the legal size document, on the college credit program, I almost always run into people that are asking questions about, how in the world they, mostly community colleges, are going to implement dual credit. I think I've asked this before, but how are you working with the community colleges to help them understand better how to bridge that gap of offering dual credit classes in high schools?
Dr. Stafford is joining us to respond.
Hello, Dr. Stafford.
We actually have this on your agenda for this afternoon, and so I hope I can remember now what are in my notes. But we did do a survey. I think we had 67 of the institutions respond, and they do acknowledge that they're having a difficult time finding enough qualified faculty to meet all the needs. They're also finding a lot of requests for dual credit offerings with such small numbers of students that we can't do it economically. So your instincts were on target, and I think we've got the institutions well aware of it and working towards solutions.
Okay. All right, well, I'll bring it up again this afternoon.
Good. I'll have better notes by then.
Thank you. I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Thanks.
And also on Objective 3, the bottom of page 4, when we talked about the TEA possible indicator for high schools for the rigor of the senior year, for the recommended advanced high school programs, one of the things that I think we talked about not only was to measure credit hours taken by seniors for AP, dual credit, and IB, but also to measure creative and effective ways that high schools will have developmental ed programs, so that you're not just taking that, slice of the student body that are ready for college, ready for dual credit, let's make this more rigorous. But I don't know, maybe I'm exaggerating the definition of rigor, but it seems to me that students that aren't passing whether it's end of course exams or now currently tax, it seems like that's such an incredible opportunity to take that group of students cheaper, better, and in a time period where they have the time, and move them along so that they don't have to take those developmental ed courses in college. And I know we've talked about it before, but I guess my point is if it could be a part of that indicator system for accountability.
It would really help, because the culture in these high schools among those students that you're talking about is, oh boy, my senior year I take 2 courses and get a job, and then they're not ready.
We know kids like that.
Yeah, we do.
We have them in our families. Any other comments?
This says that the 4x4 requirement you were just talking about began with this year's 9th graders. Is that accurate? Because I recall there was something that I thought got delayed.
No.
Okay, so this is starting this year's 9th grade.
That does go into effect.
Any other questions? If not, that concludes today's agenda for the Committee on Participation and Success. I want to thank everyone for your participation. And we are adjourned until what time, 1 o'clock?